Hi, I'm Kendall, and this is week 2, or day 8, of Kendall Writes a Story. On today's episode, I want to talk about something very near and dear to me, something that I've been most excited about starting this project, and that is storycraft. And specifically, in order to talk about storycraft, I want to answer a very basic question, and that is, why am I writing a story about Abram Wade? Why aren't I just writing down facts on a piece of paper? Why didn't I make a Wikipedia article and send it to my parents, which I might still do? But why didn't I just do that? Why does it have to be a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end? And, there has to be growth and a change, and there have to be different scenes, and there has to be conflict, right? Why did I want to do all that? And it comes down, the answer for me comes down to one very simple thing. Right. So stories are tension, right? The title of this episode, that's what stories are. And it comes from this book, which I don't have on me at the moment. Sorry, it's called Story Grid. It's one of the courses I've been following. If you are an aspiring writer or looking for models, I highly suggest this one, or at least check it out. It worked very well for me. Again, not an endorsement. I don't know the person, just sharing tools that have helped for me. Sean Coyne, I believe, is the name of the person that wrote the book, The Story Grid. And I've been using it in comparison with Blake Snyder's beat sheet model as well. Those two work well for me. They work well with my mind together and help me model out a story. So if you're looking to do some writing, I humbly plug that just to kind of start off. It's been a really great model. But anyway, one of the principles that Sean, the writer, hits on multiple times is that stories are tension. That's why we go watch them. We don't go to the movies to watch somebody, bake bread. We go to the movies to watch somebody attempt to bake bread, then find out that their oven is broken, then go to the store only to get robbed, right? And then come back home and make the best bread in their life, and that gets them to fall in love with the person that's coming over for a date, right? We want that tension. As I was researching Abram Wade, two things became very clear to me. One, there was tension in Abram's life, tension that I could see in documentation. I could see him, I could see where he had joined the army. I could see where he wrote out his story of leaving his slave owner. I could see how he went with one of his best friends, John Aiken, and actually was related to his owner. John Aiken's aunt was also his owner. Tension in whom he's interacting with, how he's interacting. I mean, can you imagine living in an area where one of your best friends actually is related to the person that owns you? Could you imagine being related to a person that has all rights over you? I mean, that is very tense. And so that's personal life, right? And then leaving that place, gathering your horse and 138 bushels of corn, which again, we see this written down. These are actual documents where this information is coming from, and then taking that to the military and signing up, right? Very tense time. So Abram had tension in his life, but then most importantly, the country was very tense. I mean, this story takes place between 1860 and the early 1880s. That is probably the most tense time of this country, because what you had at the time, right? Not to overplay it at all. Actually, the opposite, to kind of get into the mindset to truly understand what was happening, is that half the country decided in 1860 after an election that they didn't like the results of the election. And so they were afraid that the results of that election would cause them to change their economic way of life, specifically slavery. And now, if you're someone like me, I'm in my early 30s, and I was taught in high school, this was in the early aughts, right? Early 2000s. I was taught in high school that the Civil War was about states' rights. And now we know that is just simply not the case. You can look at basically every document that every state, when they seceded, they passed basically their version of a Declaration of Independence, each state did. And almost every single one of them says, we're doing this so that we can own slaves. I mean, it is pretty darn clear at the time why they are doing that, right? But no matter what, that regardless, the country was ripping itself apart based off of economic issues, social issues, and then of course it was all manifested geographically. And then you had 5 years of a civil war, of the country saying, you're not going to leave, right? We're not going to let you rip us apart. And so it was this battle, this tense battle to keep it together. And then what happens after that? Everything's not copacetic, as we'll find as we discuss more about Abram. It is not copacetic. It is the exact opposite. The U.S. actually had to send in troops to all the southern states and keep them there. States did not automatically become states. They had to apply. They had to meet certain requirements in order to become a state again. They had to pass constitutions, write constitutions that had certain provisions for freed folks, that had to allow them to vote, that had to allow them to own property, all right? Arkansas, for example, didn't become a state again until 1868. 3 years it sat as a territory. You know, not a part of this country, not a part of the Confederate States, because the Confederate States had been defeated in 65. So for 3 years it sat as nothing, right? And that was because the government, the whole government, was truly being rewritten. So this was a very tense time. But then after that, you had some amazing things for freed folks. The first public schools in the country and in Arkansas were initiated right after the Civil War. Public schools for everybody, but it was to help freed folks. One of the compatriots of our main character, Abram Wade, he was a police officer. He was appointed in 1869. I have his newspaper listing of when he was appointed, right? The 1868 Constitution of Arkansas had like 35 or 40, I can't remember, somewhere 40 to 50-ish people writing it. 8 of them were freed folks, right? So an amazing time, that type of representation. And then throughout the country, the first African-American senators were not in the 1950s and 1960s, they were in the 1860s and 70s, the first African-American governors, right? So we had a lot of growth and a lot of making things right. And then in the 1870s, the troops pulled out, and this is especially true in Arkansas, and things kind of reverted. So you had sort of this rise and fall, almost, this false hope as an outsider looking in. That's how I would perceive that. Things are getting better. Look, we're allowing you to vote. We are finally changing the errors of our ways, right? Trying to. And then it goes backwards to the point that in the 1880s and 1890s, when I was looking just random things in old newspapers, it seemed every newspaper on the front page was a story about someone being lynched, about another, and it was just very, another person gets lynched, another person gets lynched, another person gets lynched, another person found dead hanging. I mean, it just is bizarre, intense. And so that's why this story, to me, said it deserves a story, right? Or at least it can be a story, because there is so much tension, there's a story to tell here. But then the second, I think, question of that is, why? Why write a story? And if it's not clear now, then hopefully it will be. At least to me, it became very clear that I saw similarities between that time and where we are today. And that's why, in my opinion, people write stories, is to share thoughts and draw conclusions. And maybe it's a conclusion, you know, between a historical time, or maybe it's you're comparing, you know, a vampire falling in love to real love, right? Like, that's what stories are, is they are creating a world, showing a world that hopefully you can learn from. And that's what I wanted to do with Abram, because I felt like we have a lot to learn from what Abram went through and how he went through it. And I feel like it would benefit all of us, myself included, to learn more about what he went through and to see a story. So yeah, so that's why I'm writing a story about Abram Wade. All right, next episode. I can do more on storycraft. So I guess a couple of options. If you have any thoughts, I would love to hear them. One, I could go more into research. I could do more on kind of go back and how I researched more of Abram Wade and showed more of the resources and where I got it. I can also do more on storycraft. I will probably do both of those over the next couple of weeks in equal forms. But if you have preferences or if there are other things you'd like me to talk about, I would love to do that. All right. Thanks everybody. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Stay safe. Also, don't forget to wear a mask and social distance from anybody that you do not cohabitate with. It is very important. We are working to save other people's lives in addition to our own safety. All right. Thanks so much.